I don't know if that's something we should talk about on the show or not, but yeah, your Wiz Khalifa coffee. Sorry, I just brought it up there. Calling out Brad.
I think it's important to know, what brand of coffee.
It's almond milk.
Brad.
Is that all it is? It's almond milk that you have in there?
Milk,
yeah. Uh-huh.
It's
Okay.
mocha flavor too. I like that one.
All right, that's good.
It's also kind of weird if it's just almond milk, to be honest.
That is kind of strange.
What?
Okay, all right.
Just almond
This
milk.
is
Never
just
mind.
awkward all around here
Yeah.
as we're calling
We'll get
this
to
out.
this later.
All right, we'll get to it later. All right, we need to talk about something completely the opposite of what Wiz Khalifa stays up at night thinking about. All right, let's get to this. We're coming in live right now on Facebook and YouTube for Close to the Metal. This is our computing podcast where we go in depth with specific topics about computing every week, and this week's is a pretty big one. We are going to talk about quantum computing and the future of it, what it means when when Boston Dynamics gets their hands on it, how soon until the robots take over, those kinds of things. We're going to tackle those questions today. So being live on Facebook and YouTube, we want to hear your comments, your questions, what you have to bring up, what you'd like to know about it. Maybe we can answer it. It's a pretty complicated thing, but we do have some new information coming out from IBM about how and when these computers are going to be available, maybe commercially, when you can actually get your hands on them, when quantum computing is actually going to be something that we're really using in everyday life. I'm your host, Greg Nibbler, and introducing our cast here to my right,
Brad Burke.
Brad Burke.
Matt Smith.
Matt Smith. All right, guys. Quantum computing. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We're not even going to go into the definition of quantum computing, I think. We're not going to go too far into that because it's pretty much impossible. But let's talk about why we're bringing it up today. What went on? I know there was an interview that just happened with Digital Trends with Scott, let me see here. I've got his title. Scott Crowder, who is the CTO and Vice President of Quantum Computing Technical Strategy and Systems for IBM. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
I actually
you
did.
did.
Nail it?
You
Okay,
did.
good. All right,
Nailed
good.
it.
I can read.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. All right, got that part right. So DT had an interview with him talking about the IBM Q, the new computing system that they have coming out of that they're working on. What do we know about this? Let's get this as a starting off point and of where we're going.
Okay. Well, IBM Q is their announcement that IBM is working to make commercially available quantum computers. And IBM Q is not so much the name of a specific product as much as it is of the initiative overall.
Okay.
It's basically a sort of a partnership deal where they're going to work with partners and they're going to seek out more partners to specifically work with in getting a quantum computer that's up and running for commercial enterprises.
Okay.
And that will be a first and a very important first because we've been hearing about quantum computers for probably like 2 decades. Has the idea of a quantum computer been around, and I think it came around. It's been coming around a little bit more slowly than maybe some people thought it would.
Right.
But this is a good indication. If this initiative is successful, I mean, they'll basically be on their way. Like they'll basically be here.
Okay.
So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, and it is something, I feel like we were hearing more about quantum computing. We're hearing a lot more about it just in general dialogue, general discussions. Quantum computing seems to come up more. We do have some questions that are coming in. I'm going to ask you guys as they're coming in on YouTube and Facebook. Can quantum computers play Crysis 3? Was a big question. No, they
Depends
can't.
on the computer, but probably not.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry. That was Vicky on YouTube.
Play Crysis and not play Crysis.
Okay.
At the same time.
Oh wow. Okay, we're going there with this. It's going to be a real Star Trek.
Work because a quantum computer is so fundamentally different. I mean, it is fundamentally different from the computers that we know today. It doesn't work in the same way.
Right, and so just even understanding that concept is kind of a weird thing in its own right.
So that means that to actually develop for a quantum computer, you have to develop differently. IBM's not going to release their first commercial quantum computer, and then everyone's going to go install Windows 10s on it. Probably. Unless, I don't know, someone decides to make a very interesting emulator. I
would hope we're beyond Windows 10 if we're using a quantum computer.
Well, maybe, it'll be Windows Q or whatever, the first quantum operating system. Microsoft, I'll expect royalties if you use that. So that's sort of the whole idea. And this actually, in that regard, is not something that is totally new with IBM Q or IBM Q, because actually last year there was a 5 qubit quantum computer that IBM had, and it was making that available to, if I recall right, it's pretty much anyone who wanted had the chops to program it. They were basically saying like, we have this. I mean, we want you to try and program.
Yeah, because they need companies to come up with things for it.
It wasn't just like, it was companies, it was researchers, is anyone who thinks they could. So that's IBM Q is sort of the extension of that, and trying to gain some more traction, get more partners for the impending release.
Okay. So they definitely want more people to be involved in it. And I think one interesting thing that I read about in the interview, and again, this interview is at digitaltrends.com too with Scott Crowder, was just talking about how we're basically in the 1940s version of computing versus, 60s and 70s when things really started going out. So, I mean, it's really in its infancy as far as where we're at.
I mean, last year also, we ran a really great article. It's called Quantum Computing Will Make Your PC Look Like a Graphic Calculator. And you can do a Google search for that, or I don't know, maybe it'll be in the show notes at the end. But basically, in that piece, we had a bunch of interviews with different people involved with quantum computers, and the gist of it was that there's not like an agreed upon way of building a quantum computer.
Yeah,
and that's where the 1940s comparison comes in. You think today, all our computers are built in very similar ways. For the most part, we're using x86 computers that have that specific instruction set, and they have a lineage, that goes back to both AMD and Intel, because AMD created the 64-bit instruction set, but back to the Intel processors of the late 70s, I think, was when they first came out. And if you're not using that, then you're using something that's probably got an ARM processor, and it's using an ARM instruction set, and it's built along those lines. But they're all using silicon. They're silicon-based chips. They're produced at a limited number of factories from a limited number of companies across the world. So there's a lot of similarities in how all the chips that we use today are constructed.
Yeah.
And none of all that, we kind of take for granted, but of course there was a time when that was totally not agreed upon.
Right.
There was a time in the 1940s when it was vacuum tubes, it was punch cards,
and that's the level that we're at with quantum right now.
Yeah. So the gist of the article we ran last year was talking a lot about different competing notions of quantum computers, and the fact that we're getting a lot closer to a final a design that seems to work the best, something that could be more agreed upon, but we're not really there yet. And if IBM Q is successful, that would be probably a good indication that we are getting in that direction, because what they want to do is produce a 50 qubit quantum computer, which is substantially more powerful than any general purpose quantum computer ever created yet.
Okay.
And
I think that
would put them way ahead of the curve.
So that would kind of jump them up above everybody else.
Yeah, it would put them way ahead of everyone else.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that too, just kind of comparing to, there is a quantum computer that's been available, but it's different for a number of reasons. Jumping ahead just a bit though, I think I kind of want to go to this question here that Spartans2259 on YouTube just put up. What are some of the day-to-day applications of quantum computing versus currently available computers? Like, do we have any idea of what those would be? Just a general, and we'll touch on this a lot more as we go through. But
yeah, it's not going to be. I mean, like we were kind of saying, you're never going to install Windows 10 on one of these things. Like that's really.
Can I play solitaire on it?
Probably not.
The main thing I need to know.
This is really for handling things like handling really huge data sets. When you're talking about like weather systems for the entire planet, and you're trying to track that kind of thing.
Okay.
Or molecules, protein chains, that sort of thing. These questions that, like, you talk about something like Folding at Home, which is trying to use computers from all over the world as a massive sort of cloud to, work on protein folding.
So we're talking
these
about
are the kind of computers that could answer these questions much, much faster.
Skynet stuff.
Yeah, the kind of things where especially where you're not trying to solve a typical equation.
Yeah.
You're not trying to just, like, calculate, how much money is going from where to where. It's really like, oh, I've got, this massive set of numbers, this massive set of data. What's going on here? Like parsing this data and trying to figure it out, which sort of even moves towards like this should help enable neural nets and things like that as we look for things like the paths of least resistance and most optimal setups like we were talking about with D-Wave. And it's really, it's different kinds of questions. Like the computers that we use every day, like you were saying, they're calculators. At their very core, that's all they're doing is they're adding and subtracting things all over the place to keep track of everything.
A whole bunch of calculations.
And it's a different kind of equation. It's a different kind of number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An interesting example that I read on an Ars Technica article was the example of let's just say you're doing a basic phone book search, right? Mm-hmm. You have a phone number in a book of 10,000 phone numbers.
Okay.
And you need to find a number in that phone book. And on average, with a classical computer, you would expect that you would have to go through about 5,000 of those.
To track it down to find the one
and you might get it the first time, you might get it at the very end, but generally speaking, you're going to have to go bam, 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 bam through that data set. With a quantum computer, it's supposed to be possible to find your result in about 100 measurements.
Wow.
And honestly, I don't know exactly how.
Yeah.
Because
is it just because it's using so many different computations at one time? Or?
I don't exactly know, but it's because the data set in a quantum computer is no longer just zeros and ones. It's a bunch of qubits that can be in an either on or off state or simultaneously in both states.
Yeah.
And as those are combined into larger and larger sets, it creates this very exotic range of possibilities. Another way of describing that I've heard is that a classical computer is a set of on-off switches, and a qubit is more like a spear.
Okay.
With just
it
possible
could be anything
results
you want
all over that spear, and you're measuring along that spear using a variety of different ways, but
spear.
Excuse me?
Spear? Are you saying
sphere?
Sphere. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure there either, but I'm like, hey, that's why quantum computing is so difficult to explain.
It's a sphere.
It's a sphere. Think of it like this. All right. Well, we've got more questions coming in here. And so for everybody tuning in, this is Close to the Metal, our podcast, and we're talking about quantum computing. And just, it is a really difficult thing to explain and try to go through and actually like get down to how it actually works. It's tough. It's tough to really understand that. But I think we've got some other things to get to here. And we're going to talk about some other applications of how quantum computing could be used. But let's do a little bit of a comparison here. So the IBM Q, this is the interview that's at Digital Trends, where IBM has this IBM Q that they're going to work with commercial partners to try to foster more use of quantum computing, I guess, find some more applications for it in a commercial aspect. But there's also another one that's been out before, and that's the D-Wave, which I think some of us have heard that name before. I've heard the name D-Wave in quantum computing, but I didn't really understand what it was they were doing. Now, one thing with them, supposedly on their computer, they're using 2,000 qubits versus IBM's goal of just 50 qubits. How is the D-Wave not just a far superior, far more advanced computer?
The D-Wave has always been a topic of contention with quantum computing because they are using quantum annealing.
Okay.
Which is, so basically with their system, they can solve questions of what's the lowest energy state in a system, or what's the energy cost of something. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of problems they can solve, but that's the only kind of problems their system can solve. So it's really good.
Specific.
It's a more specific design. It's not a design that can take any algorithm, any question, and put it in, and you can get a result. Which is the goal. That's the idea of a general purpose computer. Because the computers we use today are generally general purpose computers that can do all kinds of algorithms and computations, we kind of assume all computers are like that.
Yeah.
But actually, that's not necessarily true. Their computers can be built for very specific kinds of algorithms. And the D-Wave system is something that is more specific. So they have a very big number of qubits, but the idea is that you can't really use them for everything.
Yeah. So it's just specifically
which is why they have so many, like 2000, and IBM had like 5 last year, and they're looking for 50 within the next few years. And a big part of the problem with why IBM has trouble getting more qubits is because quantum calculations, like the quantum universe is so weird, and there's that whole problem where measuring the quantum state can change it. And so that's obviously a problem with the computer, right?
Yeah. No, it's
if you're measuring things and that also can change them,
I think we do need some Wiz Khalifa coffee.
How
in here.
are you supposed to get proper calculations? If you typed like 1 + 1 in your calculator and doing 1 + 1, it could change that calculation to 539. Then you might have a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
And it is a bit of a problem. It's a huge problem with quantum computers and a general purpose qubit. And that's why it's been so difficult to figure out how to get it to work.
Yeah.
But the way D-Wave builds theirs with their more limited functionality, they don't worry about that. So they're able to get all these, the big numbers of qubits.
Okay.
For their specific.
So that
device.
the 50 from IBM is actually much more valuable than overall.
I mean,
as far as the
overall.
general use. Right. General use.
And that's part of the idea here that this is like the 40s of computers is we don't even really have a good standard for measuring the functionality of these systems. We don't have a good standard for comparing them to each other at all. And that's one of the things I thought was really interesting about the interview we had is that Scott Crowder's trying to say, like, we need a benchmark. We need tests that we can run. We need
to understand.
We need to understand this, like the way these work practically, which I think is part of their rollout is figuring out if you can put them in the hands of researchers and companies who need to use them, then you can find out like what are the optimal workloads for these machines and how do we compare them to each other by knowing how fast they complete X task.
Yeah. I mean, we really are in the vacuum tube state of computing right now, just not having anywhere to really go with. To really understand and quantify, which is what we're trying to do here. And I think there's a lot of people joining in the chat, too, who are kind of in the same state, but have some ideas and some questions about it. Let's see. Matt says on Facebook here, I fear that quantum computing will nullify all current software security. Any thoughts? I mean, since it can run so many calculations at once, could that really just eliminate any kind of encryption? Or
that's definitely something that's a concern for the future. It was within the last few years, even the CIA, I think it was the CIA, it might have been the NSA, one of those organizations had issued a recommendation basically saying from now on, like any encryption algorithm that we're going to consider needs to be developed with the idea of quantum computers in mind.
There's actually a name for this.
What is it?
Post-quantum cryptography.
Post-quantum cryptography. And yeah, you're right. Like I gave you that example of the phone book search earlier. Yeah. Modern cryptography uses algorithms with factors so large that it's not possible to just crack them through brute forcing it with the power of a classical computer. But because a quantum computer is so much more powerful at that sort of thing, it just can rip through them.
Yeah, because it's running all of those computations at once.
Once you got a quantum computer that was functional, and once you were able to start developing algorithms for it to get the answers that you want, then like the encryption that we have today would be pretty much boned. Like not going to be much.
There's nothing
anymore.
that it can.
Now I think I wouldn't worry about it in the near future because not too much because. While quantum computers might be coming down the line commercially in a few years, they're still we're still a long way from the hacker in the back of a van pointing up to a Starbucks, logging in on the Wi-Fi, getting on his quantum computer, and just cracking everyone's cryptography. Quantum computers are big. Yeah. And they require a lot of exotic cooling equipment.
And that's a point that was brought up, talking about a lot of the expense is the cooling equipment.
Yeah. They are major machines right now. If you look at our website, we have a variety of different photos where you see people in the labs. I think that the smaller ones are like a little bit smaller than a refrigerator right now. So I believe that's just the core equipment in the cooling. So there's also, I believe there's some supporting equipment that's also required to go with that. So yeah, these are things that are in labs, and it's going to be quite some time before everyone's going to have them. But it is also, we are headed in that direction. So you can imagine someday it probably.
How far out do you think that is, that we would have a personal quantum computer?
Decades.
Decades?
Yeah.
It's that far away.
And I think at that point too, it would almost be in the form of like a home server or something. Because again, like you almost don't need this sort of power for everyday tasks.
Yeah.
And so it'd be the kind of thing where you have one in your home that's like powering every other computer in your house and is, kind of running you talk about things like IoT management and like really minute kind of stuff like that across, an entire building.
Yeah.
When the AI takes over, that's what we're using is quantum computers.
Yeah. It's so far in the future that it's kind of hard to really say that you'll even have one because, hey, by the time that's like technically feasible, we might not have local clients anymore. Maybe we'll just have like this big Wi-Fi cloud that circles the planet with like 1 million microsatellites in the orbit that
and they control the weather.
So our computers are just screens with Wi-Fi adapters in them. I don't know. Maybe it's a possible future.
It
could be something else. So it's really hard to say.
Jake on Facebook, and again talking about quantum computing and just like where it's going and what we know so far, and maybe some of the applications you could have for the future. Jake says it's like the original IBM machines back in the 1960s. So in 2050, we'll have personal quantum computers. And that's what, Scott Crowder from IBM said it's even further back. It's like the 40s. It's like we're in the vacuum tube stage where it's a whole giant warehouse for a computer. And that's kind of what the state that we're at with it right now. Let's see. And if you have any other comments or questions, please drop those in there. Spartans on YouTube says, so I'm guessing it's going to be mostly AI-oriented programming or self-programming, where it's just self-learning how to.
I think that's the hope, is that these will sort of help enable that sort of neural network, self-learning algorithm, data-driven sort of programming.
So that would be possibly, one of the applications.
It could help a lot with
Skynet again. Back
with
to Skynet.
the actual input of the data. I can see that being one of the bigger uses because, sensory data is very complex, and if you have all these, that's a problem that modern computing systems really run into. When you have like all these cameras with these high resolution inputs, and maybe you want to do it in like infrared as well, maybe you want to do it in this other spectrum, maybe you want to get audio in there, maybe you want to get X, Y, and Z, then it becomes really complex. That's why like the NVIDIA, for example, has suddenly become like the big AI company, just because they have a lot of compute power in their video cards, right?
Yeah. So
they found a way to adapt that. And certainly, when quantum computers come around, IBM and others will be looking to adapt that as well.
Is there anybody else working on this other than IBM as far as that? We know we have D-Wave with their specific uses of it, but anybody besides IBM?
There's not companies that come to mind right away. In this article that we had from last year, I'm trying to just see what the other university. There was a university that was utilizing University
Cambridge.
of Sussex.
And E. Reynolds on YouTube is asking that same thing. Are there any other working models besides D-Wave?
And that article from last year was talking about the competition between IBM and University of Sussex, and in the regard of how they were choosing to build their quantum computers.
Okay.
Now, obviously, IBM's a company, and the university is not. So how they
resources and
choose more resources, and also how they're choosing to distribute their findings might be a little different, although to IBM's credit, they have been very community-driven, and like I said, last year, they gave some very general access to people who wanted to try and program. They've actually released some pretty detailed schematics of their 5-qubit quantum computer last year. So, IBM is engaging in the scientific community with this.
Which is good. It's good that they're being open about it.
Yeah, and again, it's also for their own benefit because, like I said, no one knows how the compute to program for it.
Right.
Which
Or
would
what
make
to
their
even
computer
really
a little
utilize
useless if
it.
IBM was like, like I said, if they came out with a computer, no one knew how the program for it, it wouldn't be of a lot of use. Now, also, I remember this. Intel is also starting to look into it. They announced in the end of 2016 that they wanted to look into making qubits built from silicon. The reason being that they really know how to make silicon. So if we can build some qubits with silicon, boy, Intel would be on board with that. However, there's not anything that is significant to announce in that other than Intel's working on it.
Okay. All right. So some other companies possibly, taking going for it. Let's see. Maurice on Facebook says, doesn't UT Austin have a quantum computer? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do.
There are a bunch
I'm
of
honestly not sure.
There's like a list of different universities
that are involved.
There are
in
a ton of them that have some sort of, they're researching with companies or they're on their own. Looks like University of Tokyo, Waterloo, Yale all have pretty big partnerships with it. So
yeah, I would not. We definitely have not spoken with everyone who has
some
quantum
ability
computer
to use
experience in our pieces. So I'm sure that there are other sources and other people working on it that we're not even aware of. But
and that's the thing. I mean, it's so new, and it's such a new concept and a new use of this technology that we're in such the beginning stages of it. That's hard to say. Yeah, who's using one and what exactly they're utilizing it for.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's kind of difficult. Other than D-Wave, we know has their giant one for specific things.
We're even in the beginning stages of talking about it, which is kind of the funniest thing about it.
Even comprehending it and understanding.
I can, as we're the computer guys, and I can definitely say, being as such, that one of the biggest challenges of covering computers is the fact that even today, what your regular computer runs off of is way too complex for anyone who's not an engineer to really understand.
Yeah.
It's built at a scale that you can't really understand. You can't even really see it to analyze it. It's so tiny. All the transistors you need a microscope to look at them. Mm-hmm. It's already at that point where it's beyond what someone who's not already specifically trained in that is not really going to be able to get down to details and totally understand how it's working. And then quantum computers just take that to the next level. They take it to a realm where we don't even fully agree on how the physics are working. And we don't know how those physics interact with the classical physics that generally govern our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty crazy realm, and it's going to be a while before we figure out, how to really speak about it and make it,
make it understandable. Make it have even a common language to use to talk about it.
Yeah. Even a common language. We're still working on things in that regard. So.
A couple of final comments here, just seeing on Facebook. Rich asks, can a quantum computer explain what women think? That's we don't know. That's possibly in the future.
That's a terrible question, by the way.
David also asks, can it open up parallel universes? So we're getting a fringe territory.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to write that out of the realm of possibility.
Okay. These are things that to think about. But yeah, as people are coming through here and just talking on Facebook and YouTube, and as we're kind of wrapping this up, again, talking about quantum computing and talking about the IBM Q and the Scott Crowder interview, who is the CTO and Vice President of Quantum Computing Technical Strategy and Systems for IBM. And there's a full interview at digitaltrends.com with him and just about IBM Q and what they're using for that and what their goals are, and trying to get it into the hands of more commercial, more applications, more people to program for it and find out how you can even utilize this and what it can be used for. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of now traveling to other dimensions comments coming through. We're getting into the fringe territory.
Can we leap back into the bodies of historical figures?
Oh, see, there we go.
To re-experience their lives.
Oh,
perhaps change history.
Perhaps there it is. All right, I think we've got a new show on Netflix coming out now. We've just written one. Let's see. Jerry says microscopes won't do it. You need an electron microscope or an atomic force microscope. I'm not sure. It was probably a comment of something that we were just bringing up.
Did we get the kind of microscope wrong? I think we might have.
Marie says, don't they also have a problem with processing complex problems quickly? I think that's kind of what the quantum would be solving, is processing a lot of complex problems very quickly. If I understand that correctly, or I could have that
I think I
I'll leave
need a
that
little
to
more
you.
details on that question.
Okay, a little more
honestly.
details on that question. All right, we'll leave it at that. All right, well, I think that's probably about it for today. Any final comments or I mean, are you guys excited about quantum computing, or is it just too early to even understand where it's going with it?
I'm pretty hyped about it. I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting. And
Is it something we're really going to see utilized in our lifetime, or
Yeah,
yeah?
I think so. I mean, unless IBM comes out 3 years from now and they're like, guys, we can't do
Never
it.
mind.
It won't work. Sorry. But no, I mean, like this is Star Trek level, like,
Yeah.
sci-fi kind of stuff. So it's very interesting to see how it's going to pan out. And the fact, I mean, IBM has not given a set release date, but they're saying, hey, I think in a few years we can put this out.
Yeah.
And if that's true, I mean, that's pretty nuts.
Could be a pretty revolutionary thing once it actually makes it out. All right, well, it's exciting stuff, and this whole article, this whole interview is at digitaltrends.com too, so you can go there and take a look at that, and we've got a bunch of articles on quantum computing from that as well. So definitely go find that. And again, this is Close to the Metal. This is our computing podcast where we go in depth with different things each week, and that's why it's always fun. Today, quantum computing. Maybe we'll be talking about CPUs next week, or who knows what'll come up. But we've got a lot of back episodes available both on YouTube and on the site at digitaltrends.com, and then also as an audio podcast. So subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher, wherever you get your audio podcasts, and definitely keep it in mind, and tune in live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, where we broadcast live on here, and that's why we love having the interaction too of the live audience on Facebook and YouTube. It's a lot of fun seeing what other people think and what they want to know. Let's see, I see some comments. Looks like I got here a little late. That's why it's available for a replay. So you can go back and watch it anytime, or get that audio podcast and download it. So again, Close to the Metal. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week with another episode.